Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and this is part 4 of the Warhound build series. So if you've missed parts 1 to 3, I'll leave links in the description below. But this is the final part of the build of the Warhound from Forgeworld, and what we're going to be doing is focusing on how we magnetise the weapons and the tiny last little bit that I'm actually going to glue together for the head, or the cockpit, whatever you want to call it, the main head, and a couple of other tiny little bits of detail that we're going to glue onto the weapon arms. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So here we go then guys, this is the equipment I'm going to be using in order to magnetise the two weapons. Now I've got the Inferno Cannon and the Vulcan Mega Bolter here. But obviously there are two other weapons available. There's the laser blaster and the large plasma blast gun as well. So after cleaning all the parts up as usual, we're just going to run through what we've got here. So we've got the two upper arm ball sockets which go into the arm receivers where those little servitor dudes were, if you remember from part 3 of the video with the torso build. I've got one of those, well I've got both of those in front of me as well. And those ball joints enable you to get maximum posability from the weapon systems. And this little bit here, where it says top, that is the top. Quite simple. I don't really know what the difference is. It didn't feel like there's a massive size difference between the two. So if you do get it upside down, it's probably not going to make the biggest difference to the build. So those are the bits that we need. Those are the resin components. We've also got these little top caps that go over the top of there to hide any overspill or any of the glue or anything like that we're going to be using. So that's quite nice. Then we have two magnets. So I'm using 15mm by 3mm neodymium rare earth magnets for this. They've got about a 3 kilogram pull, which is plenty enough for these two components. Bear in mind that the gravity will kind of try and pull these away. So if you use any lighter weight magnet, you may find that the pull is not enough on smaller magnets. So 15 by 3 seemed to work for me. Now how we're going to glue those magnets, we're going to use our favourite JB Weld. As you can see, I've nearly used a whole pair of tubes up for this build. And then we're also going to be using some green stuff, and that is just to hide what we're going to be doing with the cutting. So the thing we're going to do with the razor saw is cut off the bottom of the ball joint that fits into the weapon receiver itself. And we want to cut it by the distance of about 2 magnets, so about 6mm. And that will enable us to make sure that the height difference from adding those magnets is going to be lost inside the weapon itself. So we don't need to drill anything out inside the weapon like on this large Inferno Flamer. The difference in height will be lost in cutting that ball joint off. And you can see here I've got a plasma blast gun, and you can see the end result of what we're going to be achieving here is that magnet in that little recess down there, packed with a bit of green stuff. And here's the other weapon as well. Packed with green stuff and with JB Weld, so they just won't come apart, and that's exactly what we're after. So the first thing we need to do is make that cut then. So I'm actually going to go and follow the proper instructions here, even though, well, I guess there is a little bit of difference looking at the video, that the top section is more of a ball than the bottom is. The ball section on the bottom does look like it's been cut a little bit. So I guess make sure you do it the right way around, and that'll be the way to do it. So what we're going to do is cut through about 6mm off of that bottom ball receiver, and that will enable us next to be able to put the magnets in. So I've already gone ahead and cut the other one. You don't need to see me use a razor saw. I'm sure it's not particularly exciting. So this is the bottom section, and you can see here now, if I just drop those magnets in, even though there is the protective spacer in there, if I put that top ball section in now, you can see that the height is exactly the same as it would be if you were assembling this without magnets, and you still had that full base ball joint on the on that socket, or on that pair of ball socket joints. So I've mixed up some JB Weld. I've got my orientation triple checked against the other weapons that I've already built, because obviously I want to be able to use them on this particular Titan should I determine that I want to switch the weapons around. And as usual, make sure you score both surfaces. Well, in this case you can't really score the magnet, so we're just going to score the resin surface here. That'll enable the adhesive that we're using here, which is JB Weld. As I've mentioned, other products are available. And just put it on both surfaces and then squish it together. It doesn't really matter if you get too much splurge out. That's always a good sign. It means it's forcing it into those score lines we've already put it in. And then once we've done that and we've got it centered, we're just going to put it away and leave that to go off. And it'll only take 5 or 6 minutes, but we're going to leave it for a good half an hour or so just to be sure. And I've also done exactly the same, triple checking your orientation into the receiving part of that Infernus Flamer here in this case. So what we want to do now is just disguise that component that we've just done with green stuff. So I've got a bit that I've just pre-mixed here, and we're going to roll that into a little sausage, and then we're going to smear that around the gaps around that magnet. It'll also help hold it in as well, but it'll also make it look a little bit of a neater finish. So we're just going to smear that around like this. It's not quite enough. I think I need to add another little bit here. And if we go over the top of the magnet, not a problem at this stage, because once it's cured, we can tidy that completely up with a scalpel and a little bit of sanding just to bring the shape back into the more ball-sized or ball-shaped joint that we originally cut off. So we just get that all in place. Just give it a good firm press. Make sure that is nice and as round as possible. Obviously, if you're just using fingers like this, you will have fingerprints in it. So what we'll do is we'll use a small grade bit of sanding afterwards, so that'll get rid of any fingerprints. Not that you'll actually see this part of the build once you've got the weapons attached anyway, but it's just, you know, that little extra attention to detail. You don't really want fingerprints on your model. And you can see there, as I've worked the green stuff around a little bit, it is protruding over the top of the magnet, but as I said, you don't worry about that. Because we'll be cutting that off right at the very end once that's been cured, and we've left it for a good sort of 24 hours or so. And we'll put that to one side and leave that to cure. Now while that is curing, we can just go back to the head section and just put this final cable ring on. Now this basically just disguises the big ball socket that you've got on the back of the head before that goes into the torso. It's just an added bit of detail that just covers up an obvious ball and socket joint. So when you put it in there, you still maintain the full posability, well 90% of the posability really, but it just puts a little bit of detail in there to show some sort of ribbed cabling kind of effect. All I'm going to do is just leave everything else still because I need to be able to paint all that as I've mentioned before, but we might as well put this on whilst we've got the other bits drying and so on. You know, I'm always a big favour of concurrent activity in my Forgeworld builds. So it didn't feel completely smooth when I was putting this on, so I'm just going to run this little small nail file that I acquired out of a hotel. I'm fairly sure it's a hotel nail file. Always handy to acquire hobby material from hotels when you're staying in those. Just going to give that a light sand. It will also help the adhesive because it's not a very big contact point, so we can't really score the surfaces too well here. So I'm just going to give it a nice little sand just to get rid of any you know, sort of smooth surface that we've got when we're gluing these together. Just give that a nice little sand or fine grain sanding. And once the sanding's finished, we can just go ahead with our Gorilla Super Glue gel and just glue that around. Just put a small bead in control-ish around this component here, and then we can just attach that cable ring. Once that's on, I actually give that a little twist just to make sure that the glue is smeared all around all the contact points, and then once I'm happy, we can put that to one side as well. So while we've got our green stuff out from earlier, what we can do is actually go back to the large big Infernus Flamer gun, and we can fill out the little bits of gap that we've got in here as well. So where I've packed it out with green stuff and JB World at the bottom of here, we can just mix a small amount of green stuff just to smoothen off the receiving section for this magnet as well. Again, it will add that extra bit of bind to keep that magnet in place. I'm fairly convinced it will never come out, but you know what? Attention to detail, just get it in there. It will match all of the other weapons that I've done as well. It's a little bit fiddly to try and get in here because of the nature of the shape, but I use hands, fingers, whatever you can do to press that green stuff in. I've actually going to use the back end of a paintbrush to push that in as well, something non-metallic. So I'm just going to use a little paintbrush just to really press that in, make sure that it's really gone into the nooks around the edge of that magnet, and then we can just smoothen that off with some wet fingers just to finalize that in place. And there we go, just press that around, and we can leave that. If we want to cut off the excess green stuff, which I probably will do because it does encroach over the magnet, Just get an L-shaped file or an L-shaped cutting blade of some kind, and get in there, and we can remove some of that excess. We'll worry about that when it's fully cured, but it's not overly important. You know, magnet on magnet could shatter the magnets if you let them run wild. So it might be worthwhile leaving a little bit on there just to add as a sort of a buffer between the two. But what we can now do is attach the upper parts of these ball joints here into the weapon servitor receiving arms. You know, the upper arms that I haven't attached to the torso, so that we can paint those servitors a bit easier. This will also act as a handy little handle for painting as well, which is quite convenient. So once again, we're going to score both surfaces. Then we're going to use JB Weld and squeeze this in so that it's fully secured. Now this is quite a weight bearing thing because it is holding the weapons, so do spend a little bit of extra time making sure that you've got this bond as good as you can make it. And what we want to do is, this is where you're going to work out the posability of the model as well. So what I recommend is you actually put that servitor arm back on the torso and then work out how your weapons are going to hang. So you can see here I've actually not put that square in, I've put that at a slight angle so that it makes the weapon sort of hang low, pointing more towards the ground, because you know the Vulcan Mega Bolters and that Infernus Flamer are more suited to stripping infantry of their lives. So I've kind of put it pointing towards the ground in this case, and slightly pointing outwards. So it's a bit of an angle just to give it a bit of a character when you drop those weapons in. Now you can take your time on this bit and then work out the pose as you see fit for your own build. If you want them more pointing forwards or pointing upwards, then you need to work that angle out exactly for yourself. Now finally, what we can do is just to cover up that top section is we can put on this little plate here with the eagle on it, and that will cover up where that JB Weld has seeped through that little top hole. We just use a bit of super glue and get that attached, and that will just cover up this little section here. Now again, it's very difficult to score this. The contact points aren't particularly great, so I'm just going to give that a light sanding first, and then we can use our super glue and get that on. Now, I did notice on the bottom of that plate I hadn't fully cleaned it up. That's a bit amateur, but half the time when you're building Forgeworld you don't really even notice it at first, and then you come to put it together and you think, there's a little bit I haven't quite got. So that's the same as the case here, so I'm just going to finish sanding that. Also adds to that little bit of extra rough surface for the adhesive, and then we can super glue that piece on. But just add a ring of super glue around that contact point, and then we'll glue that section on. You can have these eagles pointing forwards, backwards or sideways. It doesn't really make any difference, it's just aesthetically pleasing. I've gone with the sideways look on this one. Just make sure that it is fully lined up, it is squared up on the top so that you can so it's perfectly aligned. And then once we've done that, give it a bit of pressure, and then once again put that to one side to fully dry. Now 24 hours later, this is the net result of that magnet and that green stuff after it's been tidied up. You can see I've trimmed off the top there, so that's nice and smooth, and then I've sanded around the edge to make it nice and rounded and remove any fingerprints. So because it's now fully dried, I'm quite happy to click that into the weapon, and you can see there it moves left and right because it's on a pivot like that. That's how magnets can work. And then we can just show you and make sure that I've got all my orientation correct. Here's the plasma gun, and that works fine as well. And then finally the turbo laser, and once again perfectly well held, and that will do the job just nicely. So there we go then guys, that is the Warhound built as far as we can take it, so that will still enable us to actually be able to paint it sensibly. I hope you've enjoyed the series, I hope you found it useful. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.